Let's Pretend This Never Happened, a Mostly True Memoir, by Jenny Lawson. Picture this. It's just before midnight when 8-year-old Jenny gets shaken awake by her father. He's this towering figure who faintly smells like deer urine, a hunting thing. Don't ask. And he's clutching a Ritz cracker box like it contains the secrets of the universe. Inside, he whispers, is something absolutely magical. A tiny, terrified squirrel pokes its head out. Jenny and her younger sister Lisa exchange glances. Their dad regularly brought home everything from rabbit skulls to live porcupines, so, honestly, a squirrel felt pretty underwhelming. Sensing their skepticism, their father leans in with all the dramatic flair of a Vegas magician. This, he announces, is a magic squirrel. To prove it, he asks the creature a question. "Hey, little squirrel, what's my oldest daughter's name?" The tiny animal appears to whisper in his ear. "He said Jenny," their dad announces with a satisfied smirk. The girls remain unconvinced, so their father delivers the final test. "Little squirrel, what is 2 + 3? And then something truly mind-blowing happens. The tiny squirrel raises its little paw. 5 deliberate times. In that electric moment, Jenny's entire world explodes with possibility. This squirrel is her golden ticket out of rural Texas. She'll name him Stanley. They'll go on television together. They'll be famous. But then, her father grins and rips open the box to reveal the secret, and the magical illusion shatters like glass. Stanley the squirrel isn't alive. He's a grotesque hand puppet, sliced open from behind, with her father's hand jammed right up inside its body, manipulating the paw. This singular moment, equal parts strange, hilarious, and slightly horrifying, is the perfect gateway into Jenny Lawson's world. Her book, Let's Pretend This Never Happened, is a best-selling memoir that's captivated millions, not because it presents some Instagram-perfect life, but because it does the exact opposite. It's a courageous and hilariously funny celebration of the most awkward, flawed, and deeply human moments that we all desperately try to hide. Lawson, known worldwide through her beloved blog The Blogus, invites us into a life so wonderfully bizarre it feels like fiction, yet so emotionally raw it feels startlingly familiar. Today we're going to journey through this mostly true memoir, and I promise you, by the end, you'll understand a profound and liberating secret. The moments we most want to pretend never happened are often the very moments that make us who we are. They're not meant to be buried, they're meant to be told. Our story begins in a place that feels almost mythical in its simplicity. Wall, Texas. A town so microscopic that its high school yearbook was once themed, "Where's Wall?" This was a town of dirt, cotton, and not much else. It's here, in this aggressively rural landscape, that Jenny Lawson's parents hoped to shape her into a normal person after a brief and fiery career as a 3-year-old arsonist. This, she notes dryly, was one of many things they were spectacularly wrong about. Her childhood was, in her own words, like David Copperfield meets Guns and Ammo magazine. Her father was a professional taxidermist, a man whose love for his family expressed itself in the most unconventional ways imaginable. Forget bedtime stories. This was a guy who might wake you at midnight with a dead squirrel puppet named Stanley. He was someone who saw absolutely no problem with flinging a freshly hunted deer across the dining room table for dissection, turning dinner prep into something resembling a, quote, terrible piñata. This world, drenched in blood and absurdity, was the only reality she knew. She genuinely assumed every family's home was decorated with the wide-eyed, snarling heads of bears and boars. She thought it was perfectly normal to have your childhood pets, like a duckling named Daffodil, get eaten by the people living under the town bridge. Her mother, ever stoic and patient, would simply sigh and gently correct her. "It sounds nicer if you call them transients, dear." Life was basically one long adventure in survival. Their tap water came from a well contaminated with radon, a fun detail the government warned them about in a letter. Her mother's take on the literal poison water? Oh, they couldn't swallow it even if they wanted to. They'd throw it up immediately. It's that toxic. So, no worries. Sometimes the water, poisonous or not, would stop running altogether, forcing them to bathe in the distinctly beige water, collected in a giant metal cistern outside. The house wasn't just home to people, it was practically a wildlife sanctuary. Her father was constantly rescuing baby animals whose mothers he had, usually just moments before, killed while hunting. One day it was a bathtub overflowing with 8 newborn raccoons. Her mother, ever practical, sewed them tiny shorts to wear. One of them, named Rambo, became a pet who learned to turn on the bathroom sink and obsessively wash everything in sight, including an entire bar of soap he once scrubbed down to a tiny sliver over the course of an afternoon. Another time, her father became a Texas armadillo racing champion, a pursuit which required his young daughters to venture into the woods and pull the creatures out of tree stumps by their tails. This upbringing forged in Jenny a bone-deep awareness that she was different. While other kids enjoyed what she imagined were normal, bloodless childhoods, hers was a collection of stories so bizarre they felt like outright lies. One of the most defining of these stories happened when she was 9. While playing chase with her sister, she made a sharp turn and ran, in her unforgettable words, right the hell inside of the deer that her father was cleaning. She describes the sensation as wearing a, quote, deer sweater, a moment of such profound what-the-fuckness that it triggers an involuntary, nervous giggle, even in the retelling. She promptly threw up inside of it, and to this day, the smell of raw meat or blood makes her gag. These weren't just isolated incidents. They were the building blocks of her entire reality, and this reality often collided spectacularly with the outside world. The most legendary of these collisions involved a flock of Wisconsin jumbo quail her father brought home, which her mother correctly identified as turkeys. These birds were loud, obnoxious, and fiercely loyal to her father, viewing the rest of the family as hostile invaders. They would roost in the trees, screaming at her mother and attacking Jenny and her sister as they tried to walk to school. The ringleader of this feathered gang was an unpredictable turkey named Jenkins. Jenny, already a painfully shy and self-conscious child, was absolutely mortified. She would duck into school as quickly as humanly possible, pretending she had zero idea why a gang of jumbo quail were always loitering menacingly on the playground. This fragile charade shattered spectacularly the morning Jenkins followed her right into the school lobby. He and 2 of his cronies wandered into the library and, eventually, the cafeteria, where they proceeded to defecate absolutely everywhere. The principal, well aware of who the turkey magnet was, called her father to come clean up the unholy mess. As her class lined up for PE, Jenny witnessed her father on his knees in the lobby, scrubbing up poop and fruitlessly whispering, "Go home, Jenkins." At that precise moment, Jenkins spotted her and ran over, gobbling with excited recognition. And right there, in front of her entire school, Jenny finally surrendered. She sighed, waved weakly, and mumbled, "Hey, Jenkins." It was a moment of profound defeat. She realized then that she was, in her words, kind of screwed when it came to ever becoming the most popular kid in class. But in that surrender came an unexpected freedom. The crushing pressure to fit in evaporated. Jenkins, in his feathered absurdity, had essentially liberated her from the exhausting work of trying to be someone she wasn't. She gave up on being perky and popular, and instead embraced her weirdness, diving into Stephen King novels while her classmates read Charlotte's Web. It was a lesson, she would later realize, that was absolutely worth the public turkey attack. And the turkeys? They eventually disappeared, though she suspects they were delicious. This newfound freedom to be herself carried her into high school, where she became the only goth kid in a tiny farming school where students occasionally drove tractors to class. She cultivated a look that she hoped screamed, "I've got dark, terrible secrets," but it was a tough sell. Everyone in her class already knew her secrets. They had witnessed the Great Turkey Incident of 1983. They had seen her in the handmade prairie dresses and sunbonnets her mother was obsessed with, making her look like the lesbian love child of Laura Ingalls and Holly Hobbie. Her younger sister Lisa, however, had zero trouble fitting in. She was a cheerleader, an athlete, and was even elected the school mascot, a giant bird named Wally. One afternoon, as Lisa practiced bird attack maneuvers in the living room, she turned to Jenny and said matter-of-factly, "People think you're weird." Jenny shot back, "People think I'm weird because I wear a lot of black? You're literally dressed as poultry." The argument ended with Jenny locking herself in the bathroom, refusing to take advice on being normal from someone wearing a giant bird head. But her sister's words lingered. Jenny decided to make an effort. And that, she explains, is how the peer pressure of a sibling in a bird costume led directly to her getting her arm stuck up a cow's vagina. She wasn't even enrolled in the animal husbandry class. She was just tagging along on a field trip to the local stockyard. The teacher, noticing her small arms, suggested she'd be perfect to help with the day's lesson, artificial cow insemination. Before she could protest, a shoulder-length rubber glove was rolled up her arm, and a turkey baster full of semen was placed in her hand. She saw the look in the teacher's eyes, a man waiting for a girl to run screaming so he could have a good laugh. And she'd be damned if she was going to be judged by a man who carried semen around in a thermos. So there she was, shoulder-deep in a cow, squishing out the semen baster, while a group of teenage boys looked on. Suddenly the cow tensed, trapping her arm. The teacher panicked, warning that if the cow sat down, it could actually break her arm. She yanked her arm out hard, only to realize with horror that she'd left the turkey baster behind. In that moment, with what little dignity she could scrape together, she slowly peeled off her glove and simply walked away, leaving the boys and the teacher to deal with the aftermath. That afternoon, walking beside her sister, who was still in her Wally costume, she said calmly, "I took your advice about trying to fit in, and I got my arm stuck in a cow's vagina." Her sister paused, her giant bird head bobbing thoughtfully, and replied with quiet dignity, "Well, that'll happen." High school, Jenny concludes, is life's way of giving you a record low to judge the rest of your life by. No matter how bad things get, she can always look back and say, "At least I don't have my arm stuck up a cow's vagina." As she moved into young adulthood, Jenny carried this tapestry of bizarre experiences with her, along with a secret she rarely spoke about, a severe and often paralyzing anxiety disorder. What her mother had called a nervous stomach back in the 70s was, in reality, a condition that made even simple conversations with strangers feel monumentally challenging. She describes it as having a sensor in her head that works on a 7-second delay, always recognizing the completely inappropriate thing she just said about 7 seconds too late to stop it. This constant internal battle often results in spectacularly awkward social implosions. She tells the story of being at a Halloween party, dressed as a Spartan cheerleader from Saturday Night Live. Cornered by a guy in a John McCain costume, who was launching into a political tirade, she panicked. Forbidden by her husband Victor to discuss politics, her mind desperately scrambled for a safe topic. After a moment of excruciating silence, she blurted out, "One time I got stabbed in the face by a serial killer." The story as it tumbled out was that she'd been having a nightmare about being attacked by the Night Stalker and woke up screaming, her face covered in blood, because she actually had been stabbed. The culprit, it turned out, wasn't a serial killer at all, but her enormous, impossibly fat cat Posey, who had fallen from the window ledge onto her face while she was sleeping, scratching her with his talons. The story perfectly illustrates the strange feedback loop of her life. Her anxiety creates an absurd situation, which then becomes another bizarre story to add to her collection, which further fuels her feeling of being a complete outsider. It was in this state of glorious dysfunction that she met her husband, Victor. He looked, she thought, almost exactly like Doogie Howser, MD, and he was wearing a denim vest. She was fairly certain he was gay. He, on the other hand, had dreamed that he would marry a girl wearing a specific coat, and when Jenny walked into the bookstore, she was wearing that exact coat. Their worlds couldn't have been more different. He was a wealthy, ambitious young Republican who owned his own tuxedo. She was a girl from rural Texas who used filing cabinets to house chickens. Their first visit to meet his parents was a masterclass in cultural collision. Victor's mother invited her to sit on the couch, but when her back grazed one of the decorative pillows, Victor's eyes widened in sheer horror. "Those pillows," he whispered urgently, "are only for decoration." In that moment, Jenny learned her first crucial rule about rich people. They never actually use their cushions. Utterly intimidated by the couch, she slid awkwardly onto the floor, much to Victor's dismay. "Look," she told him later at a Dairy Queen, "this is us. I'm the Dairy Queen ice cream spoon, you're the escargot spoon. That's why this is never going to work." But Victor simply smiled and said, "I happen to like Dairy Queen spoons." Victor, in turn, had to learn to navigate her world. During one of their first visits to her parents' house, her father, in a booming, cheerful voice, yelled, "Hello, Victor," while simultaneously tossing a live bobcat onto his lap. Victor, to his immense credit, didn't scream. He stiffened, stared at the snarling animal, and then, in slow motion, turned and calmly shook her father's hand. It was a moment that earned him the respect of everyone present, including, it seemed, the bobcat. Their life together became a testament to embracing the absurd. There was the time Jenny, after a fight with Victor over buying new towels, rebelliously bought a 5-foot-tall metal chicken instead. She named her Beyoncé. Victor was furious, but as Jenny pointed out triumphantly, at least it's not towels. It was, she explains, a valuable lesson in picking your battles more carefully. But beneath all the hysterical anecdotes lies a story of profound pain and resilience. Jenny opens up about her struggle to have a child, detailing multiple heartbreaking miscarriages. She was eventually diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease that required her to give herself hundreds of blood thinner injections in her stomach throughout her pregnancy. The process exacerbated her anxiety and OCD, leading to bizarre rituals, like having to ask her cats to wish her luck every single morning, convinced that if she forgot even once, something terrible would happen to the baby. It's a raw and unflinching look at the terror and hope that accompany a high-risk pregnancy, culminating in the beautiful birth of her daughter, Haley. Having a child, she writes, is the ultimate exercise in perspective. It teaches you to embrace horror and indignity, because honestly, there's no other choice. She recounts taking her toddler to the pool, only to realize her husband forgot the swim diaper. The regular diaper absorbed the pool water and expanded into a giant mushroom cloud, before bursting spectacularly, covering her and her child in a bluish crystal-like jelly, right as her thin, childless neighbor walked in. In that moment of pure mortification, she could only scream after the silently retreating neighbor, "Behold, this is your future." As her life progressed, Jenny found herself slowly, tentatively, making friends. She, who had always deeply distrusted other women, found a community of fellow misfits online and in the real world. She tells of attending a weekend retreat in wine country, terrified she wouldn't fit in with the fashionable, sophisticated women. And while she committed a series of social disasters, including mistaking one Asian woman for another and then declaring herself an enormous racist, she also found genuine connection. She discovered that these women too had their own bizarre backstories and struggles. She was leaving behind, she realized, the belief she'd carried for years that women couldn't be trusted. Perhaps the most poignant story is also one of the most tragic. After moving to the country, their beloved pug, Barnaby Jones Pickles, was likely bitten by a snake and died. Jenny, alone while Victor was out of town, dug a grave in the rocky meadow behind their house and buried him. The next day, however, she witnessed a horrifying sight. A horde of vultures had disturbed the grave and were pulling at the body. What followed was a 3-day ordeal, where she found herself running at these enormous birds, waving a machete and screaming, trying desperately to protect the dignity of her dead dog. The situation was surreal, heartbreaking, and utterly absurd. The ordeal only ended when her friend Laura drove over with a shovel, and together, the two women disinterred the dog and sealed him in an igloo cooler to await the crematory. It was a moment of profound friendship, born from the deepest absurdity. Her friend, looking at the grim situation, remarked, "Dude, your dog is like Jesus. He's rising on the 3rd day." And in that dark moment, Jenny laughed for the first time in days. This is the central lesson of Jenny Lawson's memoir. Life is chaotic, messy, and often painful. It's filled with dead squirrels, homicidal turkeys, judgmental taxidermy, and exploding diapers. But it's also filled with friendship, love, and the kind of laughter that can only come from surviving the utterly ridiculous. She learns that the very experiences she wanted to run from, the poverty, the strangeness, the social awkwardness, were the things that made her strong, empathetic, and uniquely herself. They were the parts that made her her. She writes, "You are defined not by life's imperfect moments, but by your reaction to them. Because there is joy in embracing, rather than running screaming from the utter absurdity of life." In the end, "Let's pretend this never happened" isn't a plea to forget our embarrassing pasts. It's a powerful, hilarious, and deeply moving invitation to celebrate them, to wear them as badges of honor, and to understand that in our shared brokenness, we find our greatest connection. There's this pressure, especially when you're young, to present a life that's polished and perfect. We carefully curate our images, we filter our experiences, and we hide the parts of ourselves that feel strange, awkward, or broken. We spend so much energy pretending we have it all together. Jenny Lawson's "Let's Pretend This Never Happened" is a glorious and much-needed antidote to that exhausting pressure. The most powerful lesson in this book is one of radical acceptance. Lawson doesn't just accept her flaws. She puts them on a stage, shines a spotlight on them, and invites the whole world to laugh with her. What she discovers is that when you own your strangest stories, when you stop pretending the embarrassing moments never happened, you take away their power to shame you. More than that, you transform them into sources of strength, humor, and, most surprisingly, connection. Think about it. We don't bond with people over our shared perfection. We bond over our shared struggles, our shared embarrassments, our shared humanity. The story of getting your arm stuck in a cow's vagina is infinitely more memorable and relatable than a story about a flawless day. Lawson's genius is recognizing that our weirdness isn't a bug. It's a feature. It's what makes us interesting. It's what makes us real. This book is more than just a collection of funny stories. It's a deeply compassionate look at living with mental illness. Lawson writes with unflinching honesty about her battles with severe anxiety, OCD, and depression. She doesn't romanticize it, but she does demystify it. By describing the internal monologue of a panic attack, or the exhausting logic of an OCD ritual, she gives a voice to a struggle that millions face in silence. And she does it with humor that makes it accessible, reminding us that even in our darkest moments there can be a flicker of the absurd. So what can we take away from this journey into a life less ordinary? Here are a few simple ideas. First, the next time something embarrassing happens to you, try to see it not as a moment of failure, but as the beginning of a great story. Ask yourself, how will I tell this to someone later? This small shift in perspective can transform a moment of shame into a moment of future connection. Second, embrace one small weird thing about yourself that you usually try to hide. Maybe it's an unusual hobby, a strange habit, or a quirky opinion. Let it see the light of day, even just with one trusted friend. You might be surprised to find that the things you think isolate you are the very things that make others feel closer to you. And finally, practice compassion for your own messy, imperfect life. Lawson's story is a testament to the fact that you can be anxious, awkward, and a bit of a disaster, and still build a life filled with incredible love, friendship, and joy. The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to be present, to be honest, and to learn to laugh at the beautiful, ridiculous chaos of it all. That was a summary of Let's Pretend This Never Happened by Jenny Lawson. We've journeyed through some of the most memorable moments today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you walk the path yourself. The true magic of this book is in Lawson's unique voice, the hilarious footnotes, the rambling asides, the sudden turns from gut-busting laughter to heart-wrenching vulnerability. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has sparked a sense of recognition or a burst of laughter, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just entertainment. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see your own story. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and want to continue exploring life-changing books, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Billionaire's Bookshelf. We have so many more journeys to take together, and your support allows us to keep growing. Let's continue to learn from the greatest stories and minds together.